I'd like to call this meeting to order. Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Elgire?
Yes.
Chairman Yoder?
Here.
Now we will stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a moment of silence.
It's not on here, but you can.
It's on there.
It's on there.
Okay. Next is a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any public comment? Oh, public, yes. Well, yes, public comment. Anybody? Anyone? No public comment. All right. Election of a chairman. I'll take a motion to elect a chairman.
I would move that we elect
Aye.
Steve Yoder as chairman.
Why not Alan?
The pay's the same, so I'm fine either way. I second that.
Okay.
Are you tired of it? You want a break?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
3-0. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Yoder.
All right. Next up, we got current policy review. So we got Lauren that's supposed to present that to us.
I don't have a formal thing, but I thought it might be helpful just to go over the two policies that currently are approved and exist. Policies in administration, and I have maintained, as the website is maintained. So the two county policies that contain some of the information are policy 2.01, which is our current conflict of interest policy. And I primarily use this with boards and commissions. So every person who is appointed to a board or committee or commission receives a copy of this, which is signed and held in administration. It has not historically been signed by employees at the time of employment, only by those who've been appointed to boards and commissions and committees. So that's this policy 2.01. The other policy that contains a complaint procedure is the non-union personnel policy 1.7. And that one, as you can see, is quite long, it's lengthy. And this is one that was provided to me in my new hire packet as a non-union employee, which I did sign and is part of my employee file. And on page 18 of that is, in section 12, is the current complaint procedure that applies to non-union personnel, and it goes through who it applies to, who it does not apply to, and a pretty broad procedure for complaints. Also provided to you are the code of ethics for Emmett County and Grand Traverse County for review and consideration. That was really it. I just wanted to review those and give everyone a place to start as far as there being a discussion about creation of a new policy or the revision of an existing policy.
What, I didn't follow on, what pages were the complaint policies are on?
For the non-union?
I see them.
The non-union policy, it's on page 18, section 12.
Yeah, I gotcha. I guess my question is how the complaint policies with union personnel are contained within their contracts? Yes, the union has a grievance process that you have to follow. And there also are provisions that are called election of remedy provisions, that if you pursue the union grievance process, it precludes using other processes. So that's why there's a separate non-union policy regarding that. And they're all different. Well, I won't say they're all different, but the process in the collective bargaining agreement would be very different, and it would ultimately end in arbitration. That's the big difference.
Okay.
And the only thing you can raise in a collective bargaining agreement grievance is a claim that arises out of the contract itself. So it's a little bit more of a complicated situation where you're dealing with complaints made by union members.
So I met with, just so you're aware, I met with Jen, HR, just before this, and I invited her here. So I don't know, did you have some comments or input, or just listen in, or? 'Cause I figured she might be a good one to have questions. You know, she goes through this all the time. So.
You're not going to just listen in, because we'll probably put you to work. Excellent, thank you.
So, did you have comments on, for instance, the conflict of interest policy? Or suggestions?
I think the conflict of interest policy is pretty simple, and it's straightforward and to the point for monetary regard. We could expand on that if we so choose. When you read the ethics policy from Grand Traverse County, that was the only one that I read through. It's a lot more detailed than what would be allowable to people in new roles. The conflict of interest policy could apply to employees as well. It just does not. Our policy is only for board members right now, currently. That's the way I read it. It doesn't apply to
Right.
non-union or union folks.
My understanding is that in Grand Traverse County, it applies to public servants, which includes employees.
That's my understanding. I might need to reread it again.
And also the city of Traverse City extends to, I have copies of the city of Traverse City, if you guys.
Oh, really?
Well, that's an overview if you wanted an actual copy. I agree that there's an overview there. But anyways, you're welcome to have copies of them.
I didn't.
You have the Traverse City, you have a couple copies?
Yeah.
I'll take
Oh,
one.
this is just one. I was thinking.
Yeah.
This was two.
No, they're thick.
Does
It's
Jim have one?
pretty crazy.
Do you have another one there?
I don't, I only made 3.
Oh,
You can have mine actually, because it's pretty detailed. It's huge.
Wow, that
I don't
is.
think, you know what, I just don't
It's a lot
think
in
we
there.
need this kind of detail.
Well, what I was going to say is, without looking at that, my guess is goes beyond a conflict of interest policy, because typically conflict of interest only applies to members of a board, and that doesn't just mean county commissioners. That means members of the planning commission, the land bank authority, things like that, because they hold offices. Employees don't typically hold offices, and it's conflict of interest that relates to an office rather than simply a employment status. If you're going to address the conduct of employees, it would be in an ethics policy or a conduct policy or something of that nature that would be imposed directly on the employees. If you're doing a policy change regarding union employees, you would have to collectively bargain that. So those are some of the complications to applying conflict of interest policies to employees.
Well, this includes city staff, city manager, city commission, in terms of policy of the city. I thought it also included employees, but,
Probably does, Alan. But
yeah,
it's actually an ethics. In fact, the chapter for the Traverse City,
Yeah, it's called Code of
it's
Ethics,
called,
not even
it's a
called-
code of ethics, and it's actually enacted as an ordinance, which has a substantially more durability and application than just a policy.
agreed. And I agree with Gwen that this is pretty overkill for us. And probably one of the first things we need to do is determine what the scope of what we're going to look into entails. I don't. If we, it would be basically feckless to enact a policy that would include all employees. Is that correct or not?
No, I wouldn't say reckless. I would use
Not
that.
feckless, as in really wouldn't. It's just kind of
Feckless.
meaning.
In some.
Yeah, that guy too. Or freckles.
gonna
Those
say,
freckles
how many
is what.
freckles?
If you were to simply say it applied to all employees, and that's, you didn't go any farther, it would fail as to unionized employees. You
Yeah.
would not be able to enforce it as to unionized employees because it would result in an immediate grievance because it hadn't been bargained. If you alter the terms and conditions of a unionized employee's work status, you have to collectively bargain that. There are certain things you can impose, and then you do what's called effects bargaining, but particularly if it related to the potential for discipline or discharge,
Right.
that would have to be collectively bargained as to union employees.
So I think we need to start with the incident that started this whole thing. And that is you being on the board of Peninsula Housing. And then Land Bank and Brownfield making decisions that affected Peninsula. And you always disclosed and asked, do I need to be excused? There was never any gain of any kind at all involved. And
Well-
frankly, when we hired this guy, we loved that he was into housing. Let me finish.
Mhm.
That was an asset because we have such a profound need for housing in this county and so few avenues that we can help. So his knowledge and awareness and interest in housing was something we really liked. So there was never a question in Land Bank and Brownfield of his ever having personal gain. That
But
just
that,
wasn't there. And I understand people saying, well, Peninsula Housing was able to get out of paying $18,000 a year in taxes. Excuse me,
Bless you.
I need water.
I also put out some thoughts as far as when I was reading about the scope of what we might look at. You won't find Administrator Jim's name in there, and I honestly, that's not why I'm here, and I wouldn't, I'd feel it a disservice to sit on a committee that dealt with that one incident as the reason that it's here.
Well,
I'm here
wasn't your-
because-
Well, I'd like to finish now. So that was at your introduction, though, in the.
What was
piece
my
you-
introduction?
In the piece you handed out, you gave it in the background.
At that particular
As the-
time,
So I'd like to differentiate here the fact that to some people, I get that they think mommy
Mhm.
is making out here, not having to pay $18,000 a year. There's another way of looking at that. We have a citizen who's not making a dime, who's basically giving up his retirement for the greater good. He does not make a profit. He has a nonprofit organization. He works hard, and he is doing it to provide affordable housing. So is he gaining 18,000 a year? No. But what is happening by going temporary to land bank is this property is going to be available possibly for affordable housing by our holding it. And that's a pretty wonderful thing. And he's really out on a financial limb himself, working really hard to be able to do that. So it's not like there was action taken to, so Larry Mobby can save $54,000, and what a scoundrel he is. We're hoping this land and helping out the school district, by the way. So I understand people's misunderstanding, but his involvement in peninsula housing in that sense, there was never any financial gain for anybody.
And that, I think, is the issue that I believe that Commissioner Campbell wishes to address, and I agree that it's an appropriate issue to address, and that is, should the conflict of interest policy in a general sense apply to instances or relationships that exceed financial gain or are based on something other than financial gain as the definition of a conflict? Have I gotten that?
You're exactly
well
right.
known?
Yeah.
And that's going to be the thing I think we're going to need to struggle with, because I believe it is a struggle. And when you look at our conflict of interest policy, it does make direct references to the Incompatibility of Public Offices Act, Contracts of Public Citizens and Public Entities Act, and the third is the contracts and interests that apply directly to county commissioners. And there are, what you'll find if you review those statutes with care, there are certain instances where relationships beyond a financial interest are considered to be conflicting offices and therefore violating of a conflict of interest policy. But you'll also see instances where there is an exception to those for very, very small counties. Counties, I can't remember off the top of my head, and I meant to look it up. I think the threshold is 35,000, and we're under that threshold. Where in certain, because it recognizes, the statute recognizes that in really small counties, sometimes it's really hard to get people to take certain offices, and they make exceptions to the Incompatible Offices Act to recognize that. So that's something that we're also going to have to consider. But I agree with, at the time that, and I don't think it's appropriate to focus on specifically one instance, but at the time that those conflicts did come up, I really carefully read what the conflict of interest policy said and concluded that it wasn't a concern. But that was because it was based upon a very narrow trigger for the conflict, and that was a financial gain. And I think what we need to talk about is whether there are relationships that should be considered beyond that. And we can disagree about that, but we still need to talk about it.
I would not have pushed this for that individual reason that brought it out, and it showed to me that our conflict of interest policy fell short of what our neighbors are doing and fell short of what I believe should be considered a conflict of interest. for instance, the city of Traverse City adopted this ordinance not because of a financial gain by anyone, but simply because the city manager, as I recall, hired or recommended a contract to someone who was a close family friend, as she said. And I do think that's, while there may be exceptions in smaller jurisdictions, I think exactly the opposite. I think in smaller jurisdictions, there's more of an opportunity for that to occur. And we're not talking about people being removed from boards or position. All we're talking about is recognizing that and then not participating in the discussions or the votes. For instance, the city of Traverse City talks about being a conflict of interest if if it would create a lack of independence or impartiality of action. I think that's a pretty good standard. And to go to a different subject, let's talk about that.
By whose definition, though?
Well, eventually it
That's what I
comes
was going to
to
say.
the commission.
The reason that conflict of interest policies do tend to focus on a financial gain is because it's undeniably quantifiable. You can say, this is a very clear gain. This person gets, certain amount of money out of this transaction. You can make it, it's black and white. When you go to the standards that you're talking about, those very clear lines start to get blurrier and they become more difficult to enforce. Even though you have the policy, they become more difficult to enforce. And what they result in, frankly, is litigation.
Yeah.
They result in litigation when the consequence of enforcing the policy becomes onerous or problematic for whoever the policy is enforced against. So I'm not suggesting that means those policies can't ever be adopted. It's just you have to recognize that they do become difficult to enforce. So you try to be much more clear on what the relationship is you want to make create as a conflict. For example, you could say, no one, you can't have a contract, you can't enter into a contract where you're related, where there's a related person. What if it turns out that the people they dislike each other? They happen to be related, but they dislike each other. And I've seen that kind of thing.
Well, you said enter into a contract, but it takes this board
and that's
enter into a contract. So, and it doesn't take a unanimous vote to enter into a contract.
Correct, and that's why I'm saying something you would potentially judge a relationship or a transaction where, like, let's say I was the case. If a transaction was within my authority to do individually, it should be scrutinized more closely. And again, yes, if I was giving a contract, even though it was only whatever within my spending authority, and it was being given to somebody that I had a close personal relationship with, it should be scrutinized. It should be scrutinized. But what do you define as a close personal relationship? Because I would say there are people here that in any place I've ever been, there are people that I would treat like my brother and sister, but you'd never know that necessarily. You wouldn't know that.
Well, I like the phrase that we need to avoid the appearance of a conflict, and one that would bring to light a lack of independence or impartiality of action.
That's a appearance.
But
According
here's
to
the,
who?
Most of these ordinances say Most of these ordinances say, and I believe our existing ordinance says, deals with the term appearance of conflict of interest. Now, I'm going that by memory, but I believe it's there.
And I think we're talking about potentially two different things. That is, what should the standard be? And secondarily, who should determine what the standard is? And I would submit to you, there are two bodies that should never determine that. One is the person who's involved in the conflict. They should never be the one to make that determination. And the other is, it should never be the general public. Because everybody's going to have a different opinion on that. The only entity that should make that determination is the body that's making the decision. And that's why you'll recall, even though there's no provision in our conflict of interest policies, you'll recall what I did in that instance was I said, here's the situation. I am a member of the Peninsula Housing Board. You're considering an issue in front of the board that relates to Peninsula Housing. I have no financial interest. I'm an uncompensated nonprofit director. I have no financial interest. The only thing in fact, what I specifically said on the record, the only benefit I get is I get a 9-bean rose pastry at the meeting. Because we buy, and sometimes I have to buy it myself. That's the only financial interest that I had, and I submitted that.
Just one, though.
Just one. It's just one. And we submitted that to the board, and I said, is that an improper relationship? Is that a conflict of interest? And they voted unanimously to say, no, it's not.
Was there an actual vote?
There was an actual vote. They said unanimously, no, it's not. And I think if you implement that kind of thing, then you're applying an objective standard determined by the entire body, applying a subjective standard. And that has, to me, that's the only way you can do this. If you're going to use a subjective standard, you have to define the body that determines the subjectivity. And it can never be the general public, because I will defy you.
No.
If somebody is identified as having a conflict of interest, there'll be somebody that will say, that's egregious. Somebody in the public will say, you can't tolerate that.
I have to tell you, just really quickly, Land Bank has 3 attorneys in it.
And that's
I mean, you don't get anything past that group.
But what you said is exactly right, is the person who maybe, who has at least to the level, a low level of an appearance of conflict, the responsibility is to declare that. And then that person doesn't get to decide whether they vote or not.
Right.
There is a motion whether they can abstain from the voting. And then it's on everybody's shoulders. And they, like you said, it's so hard to make a decision. Maybe one person shouldn't be making the decision.
Right.
Maybe it should be a body that makes that decision.
And once that body makes that decision, you need to stick with that. That was that. You did define the policy that way. The body makes a determination, and once that determination is done, it's done.
Agreed fully.
Yeah.
I just think we need to go. Am I gathering you don't believe we need to, Gwen, my colleague? Do you think we should not go to a higher standard than just receiving some type of compensation?
Let me add a little bit of something to that. Let's not call it a higher standard. Let's call it a subjective standard. Because unless you, like I said, unless it's based upon something that is concrete, like that is my mother, or I benefit financially to at least $1 worth of or $100 or whatever it is, that's very cut and dried, it's objective. But as soon as you say the standard is the appearance of impropriety or something like that, if you're going to apply that standard, and I don't see any reason or any problem with doing that, you have to make a determination of who decides when that standard is met or not. And it can't be, like I said, it can't be the person that it applies to, and it can't be the general public, because you'll always have people in the general public disagreeing. There has to be a determination and it has to have finality.
But to get there, it is an expansion.
It would be an expansion, but I think a positive one.
Yeah.
And I have no qualms with the idea of it being something that is subjective like that. You know, that it is an appearance of impropriety, or it is a relationship that could lead to an appearance of impropriety, something like that.
And I'm not using, impropriety sounds like, yeah, I would just say conflict. Conflicts, everybody has a conflict. And there's different levels, and they aren't bad by their nature. Impropriety is bad by nature. So I'd rather use the word conflict.
The problem with that is you don't want to define something using the term that you're trying to define. You don't want to say a conflict of interest is a conflict of interest. You want to, and I understand appearance of impropriety might not be the right word, but it would be something else that
A lack of independence or impartiality of action.
Yes,
Yes,
something like that.
Get you there.
Would be, is there a possibility of partiality of action, or something like that?
I like
Yes.
the word possibility rather than appearance.
Yes.
Appearance is very
It's
loosey-goosey.
way too subjective.
Yes.
So something that talks about the possibility of an appearance, or the possibility of action that is not impartial.
So I felt very comfortable with the fact that in land bank we voted.
Yes.
You explained the possible issue, and we heard it and we voted. So you didn't just avoid, just in case. It was explained, and we had a chance to vote.
Yes, but again, the standard that was being applied in that instance was, is there a financial benefit? And what Alan is proposing, and I think there's merit in this, is to define that in a somewhat broader context, and we need to decide what that would be. And I like the idea of, as we say, the possibility that the relationship would interfere with impartial judgment, something like that.
Will then result in what?
Well,
Voting
you're defining a conflict of interest.
Because it shouldn't be an automatic no, it should
No,
be
that's
a process. It
right.
should indicate then a process of defining.
But the process is the vote by the board that determines by majority action that that standard is met after full disclosure of what the relationships are. For example, let's take it just to make so we have a concrete example. Let's say the policy said, or let's say the policy did have something like that it had the possibility of an appearance of interference with impartiality, something along those lines. And it turns out that I was actually Larry Mobby's cousin. Okay, let's say that was the case. And I disclosed that. And everybody voted and said, yeah, you know, that meets the standard. Then I have to not vote on that. And in fact, the other thing you need to define, I think, in a conflict of interest policy is what happens when the board determines there is a conflict. What has to happen? And I think that there's some policies that go so far as to say the person has to leave the room and not participate at all in the discussion. Some policies will say the person must be treated as if they're a citizen. But even there are some commentators that say that's even too much because they're a member of the board, they'll respond to them as a board member, and that's just like they're deliberating. Some say you have to leave the dais and you can stay in the audience, but you cannot speak about the subject. So you've got really three things. What's the standard? Who determines a violation? And what do you do once there's been a determination of conflict? what are the actions you have to take? And our policy, I don't think really defines any of that.
No, and as you say, it didn't set up a procedure either for,
It does not.
as far as separating that person from the decision-making process. I don't believe, well, no, I think it does, yeah, actually. I can't remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
Comment? So if you go into section 4 of our current policy, you could expand that one, I think, easily to include Mr. Dyer's statement on the possibility of non-impartial action.
Yeah, but that is a very hyper-loaded paragraph, because basically what it says, you can violate this policy because even though you're not on the board that is at issue, you can violate this policy by not bringing to light that somebody else has violated the policy. That's going way too far, in my opinion.
No, I agree, because most times, if it was black and white, if it was financial, and you didn't disclose it, but we're dealing with the policy as a whole that we're going to expand, and how some of these possible conflicts are in a gray area and are not black and white. If it was financial, and you knew there was a financial situation there, well, hell to you, and what you get's what you get.
That's easy.
But that's not what we're talking to, and I've actually never run into that in Leelanau County. So
poor Steve hasn't had a chance to say anything.
I think he likes that, honestly.
Oh, I think you've had good discussion. I like what Jim and Alan were talking about, just putting some language in there that kind of broadens the scope type of thing in essence. But I don't want to put something in there that's so open-ended that, heck, you could make anything out of it, type of thing. So I like what Alan and Jim were saying about just some language in there that defines it and kind of opens it up a little bit, but it still has limitations to it, but then give detail as to how to handle it too. I think that's a really good recommendation.
So I think we've established, we've got two silos going here. One for county board, and we haven't gotten to whatever changes or thoughts might be on our non-unionized grievance policy.
Well, wouldn't this one cover anybody that sits on a board within the county? Like wouldn't that cover that? Because if it were the administrator, if it's our treasurer,
Yes, it
anybody
would.
that sits on a board, like this would cover that. So they would be non-union, but it would cover anybody that's on any board.
If they were an employee that sat on a board, like I did.
This guy.
And that's what this covers. So if you expand on this, that would in essence take care of that, I would think.
So staying, I still think there's two silos, because I think we're going to end up discussing the complaint procedure. But
That's a really different animal.
Yeah.
Than conflict of interest. But.
Yeah, I agree with you. For instance, in Traverse City, they allow commissioners, or the county, through its ordinance, allows commissioners to accept gifts, food, whatever, up to $200 a day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, that's $1,000 a week. That's not too bad if you can pull it off. Well, 7 if you're working overtime.
Yeah, I
So,
can't believe that.
but I don't think we have. Is there anything in here that deals with that, with specific limits?
Not gifts.
We just basically don't take any gifts.
Well, without it being
The
here,
only thing we do is take per diems. Nobody ever takes anything.
But you get okay.
yeah,
We've had vendors
yeah,
that drop off, at Christmas, they drop off a box of candy.
under 200.
But we're never here to get that.
Yeah,
But
That goes to the
but
employees.
Employees are, and sometimes it happens that commissioners will get that. It's conceivable that it would happen. Maybe it doesn't happen often, but it's conceivable that it could happen.
Well, even like in the Grand Traverse County one, they're talking about even at a conference, you get a gift, Like at Mac, they go around those vendors, you could pick anything up.
Yeah.
That could-
Yeah, the $200, we need to discuss it. I'm not sold on their $200 limit, but if we're going to have an ordinance, we should probably deal with whatever limits we might feel comfortable with.
That kind of introduces the idea that you can get gifts. We've never taken gifts, period.
Well, I'm sure someone has at some point. If you go
Yeah,
to
but-
enough conferences, then,
No, I mean in the course of being.
Well, I can just imagine, let's say there's a land bank or planning commission or whatever, and there's a hot topic and the vendor brings in, that could potentially raise some concerns.
I don't know, I've been going to these things for 5 years, nobody ever gave me anything. I got a donut a couple times.
well, see, it doesn't affect you, Gwen. Commissioner Elgar, it's not gonna affect you at all.
And if the county is, so the county thing in Roscommon, you gotta put $2 in there to get your
I know.
donut.
But I'll give you an example though. I went to when I was in private law practice, I went to a tech vendor conference, and I actually won a prize that at the time was worth $450. It was a Palm Pilot that had wireless capability. It was brand new, and it was a big deal.
You know, my nephew developed those.
Cool.
I'm sorry.
But would that be considered a gift? Would that be a violation of the, of a policy that, the Grand Traverse policy?
But
I'm
you
not
won
sure.
it.
I know, but it's
Huh.
It's a gift.
yeah. I mean, you could conceivably.
I think if
that was
somebody wins a
gift.
Palm Pilot, they should keep their Palm Pilot.
Actually, this says the $200 limit, now I read it, is food or refreshments not exceeding $200. So they probably, anything provided by an individual based on a personal friendship unless the recipient has reason to believe that the gift was provided because of the official position of the recipient. So this says you're not supposed to take anything.
But again, what it's trying to get at is the possibility that, that your best friend is a vendor that might serve the county, and can he give you a gift at all? And I tend to think that situation is really mitigated when you're talking about a commission member that can't influence a decision by themselves. But it's different when it's a county administrator, perhaps, that gets a gift from his friend, and his friend is a vendor that wants to do business with the county. So it is something that you've got to address. But that would not necessarily be a conflict of interest,
Right.
unless I was voting on a contract to award that person something.
And
That's
you're not
false.
voting.
And I can't vote on the commission, and all the boards that I'm on primarily are recommending bodies, but the land bank and the brownfield are not. They act independently.
Yeah, this is more of a preventative measure rather than
That's
a
why
conflict.
it's really an ethics issue. And what it comes down to is, if you violate that, then it impacts your employment or your, because the only thing you can do with a elected official or an appointed board member is you can censure them.
Right,
That's about the only thing you can do.
right.
You can't remove them from office, but you can bring it to public attention and censure the member.
Also, should we elaborate more on the conflict of interest and then adopt a different ethics policy? I mean,
If you want to go in that direction.
that might be a better option.
Well, most of them have them together, really.
Because conflict of interest really only relates to how you vote or participate in a body.
Sure.
But the ethics is broader and relates to your conduct as an individual employee.
Right. But, we could put them under a general heading, ethics and conflict of interest
You could.
policy. Rather
You
than
could, I would
create more people.
think you might want to do them separate, but.
Yeah, why combine them?
You can separate them, I guess. I just think
I mean,
it would
is there a
simplify.
reason?
it would potentially lead to the conclusion that a violation of the ethics policy might also be a conflict of interest if you combine them, and that's not 100% certain it would be.
Can we go back to who would be involved with this? Is it possible this could also be extended to department heads, other elected officials?
Like I said,
As we get into ethics?
yes, it could be, but again, all you're going to be able to do with elected officials is to censure them, because you can't remove them or discipline them in any way. It is conceivable. I've actually drafted a censure that for a commissioner that the board ultimately decided it wasn't going to pursue, but I did draft a censure motion.
Well, these other ordinances extend to department heads, non-unionized people. And we're one big happy family. I don't see, as far as the ethics part of it, I don't see a reason not to extend that to the folks that we expect or should rise to the same level that we're expecting of ourselves.
All I'm saying is
The
that
non-union policy does have a rules of conduct,
Yeah,
so you would just add ethics there. It's already stated, it's pretty.
for non-union, okay.
And it takes two, and it does say it excludes elected officials, but there are benefits that are still given to elected officials. But it's at page 14 and 21 where it starts with the rules of conduct.
Does it have amounts or things like that, or is it just really general?
Basically just that you're to adhere to the following rules. But
Yeah.
You could always put ethics in there,
Yeah,
Where do you see that?
It's in the
page 14,
non-union
it begins
personnel
on page
policy.
14.
At page 14, it starts rules of conduct, but you could always,
Or am I on the wrong one? Where am I
I'm
at?
on the non-union.
This is
one.
the thick one.
Policy 107.
I am on
Well, the
that.
problem is then you need a separate one for the board.
Well, boards and commissions are different because they're not
Is it good?
employees. So yes.
Oh, it's 15.
You would need a
I
separate.
think you are looking
14
to
and
have
15.
two policies.
Oh,
You're looking maybe, I'm not thinking along like Jen. You're gonna have one where you're gonna have your conflicts of interest that you're looking at right now with your boards and commissions. And then I think if you want to in here, put one in our current non-union where you also do ethics on top of conduct, you kind of go hand in hand. And you wouldn't necessarily have to separate it.
Except are commissioners included in the non-union policy?
No.
There isn't really anything, like Jim's saying, there's nothing you can really do for that, the way a board member conducts themselves.
Well, no, you can censor, you can, and
it's not all you
some
can
of
do.
these, they authorize investigations into it, which would be embarrassing as hell.
Yeah.
And that's your hammer. I mean, it's not, you can't fire them,
I
but
think maybe that's what you're just looking at, right, is to add something that states if something does happen, that there's a procedure.
and there's a procedure and we know where the level is that you gotta stay below, rather than have it happen and then say, well, this person received a $400 generator, and where does that fall? Well, if it's the commissioner, I'm not sure we have anything in there that would really cover that. I don't know. But it just seems like there's a lot of holes the way it is. And I understand the need to have one for non-union and one for commissioners, but if it's an ethics policy, you could almost make them the same standards.
Oh, yeah, you can mimic
And-
language. Yeah,
And have, so that we're all on the same, we're all obeying the same rules.
So, it sounds like we're kind of on the same page. Who drafts that?
Well, ultimately, you're going to want it to be approved by legal counsel.
Sure.
So
So is that something we should have HR and you draft,
what we
send it to legal
could
and
do
send it back?
is,
Or?
Jen and I could work on a draft, bring it back to this group at a later date and say, yeah, this is what we want to have council review and move forward. Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering, it wouldn't be.
But you probably need more clarification on a couple things. If you're gonna put a dollar figure in there, What do you guys
Yeah.
want? Yeah.
Guess that'd be the main
Well, what
question,
I-
what
what I-
questions
Yeah.
you need to answer
I,
before you.
again, what I said, that the four things I think you need to define for the conflict of interest policies: what is a conflict? Who determines that a conflict exists? How is the determination finalized? And what happens once a conflict is finalized? Those four things you have to do. And I think you can define conflict of interest by saying it is either one or the other, or potentially both, a direct financial interest or gain in the transaction or vote, and then any relationship or interest that could create a impact on impartiality of action, something like that. And that doesn't have to be that exact words, but something in that realm.
Is that okay with everybody?
And those two things would define what a conflict is, that the conflict is determined by the board that is involved after declaration by the individual, that it's finalized by a vote of that board, and then if it is finalized and a conflict is found, the person has to leave the dais and not participate in the discussion.
If it's found.
If it's
And
found
I,
to exist.
along with that, is this something on our agendas? I've seen other places have this on their agenda to deal with it
Yes.
before
That
the topic comes up.
yes, that would be an item on the agenda. You have to, there's an issue on the agenda that I have a possible conflict on. I'm declaring, here's what the facts are, and then there has to be a vote on that, yeah.
But
You can make that an agenda item.
Oh, that's what you're asking, in a specific agenda item, conflict of interest, where
Yeah.
somebody, that gives somebody a chance to declare
Yeah,
if they have.
deal with it before the item comes up before the board.
'Cause generally
so
most-
that the board can just concentrate on that
Right.
item rather than on.
Most boards I'm a part of, like, it's right at the beginning, right after public comment type of thing.
Mhm.
Yep.
Exactly right.
And then usually the vote should take place right at that time.
Mhm.
And the motion would be, at the time this is considered, is there a conflict? And if it is, then at that point in the meeting, the person exits the dais, sits in the audience and doesn't comment on it, doesn't engage in the discussion.
No more Latin, no, okay. No more Latin.
Why not?
Because that's up here someplace.
Illegitimi non corrobundum.
Yeah, I told you no more.
You know what that means?
No, I have no idea.
Don't let the bastards wear you down.
Now that one I should remember.
Just, you gotta remember how to say it first.
Yeah, I don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Illegitimi non corrobundum, huh?
Corrobundum.
so we have,
Corrobundum?
Corrobundum.
Corrobundum. We have to, this is a good one, guys. We
Okay.
gotta remember
It's
it.
where you get, there's a grade of sandpaper called corrobundum, and that's
okay, that's where it comes from.
where it comes from. Well, Latin is,
Okay.
you don't want.
So we have a general consensus of what Jim brought up as far as definition of conflict and how to go about that process. Everybody on agreement with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. And what's the next question, I guess, or that you need
Well,
clarification?
then you want to go to a code of conduct that could potentially apply beyond the non-union employees. A code of conduct that would apply to commissioners. And again, we could pursue discussions even with non-union, the union employees, to say, we intend to employ this as a standard.
Yeah, the code itself could be identical for both groups of people. The solutions will change, or the remedies will change for commissioners in particular, simply because you can only censor.
Right.
The only thing that I would say, and I think you could take, as Jen points out, the Rule 11, or Section 11 of the non-union personnel policy does define a code of conduct. The thing that I would have some concern about is when you look at, there are so many things listed here, and some of them are, it's hard to imagine that they're equated with each other. For example, prohibitive conduct is and find one
Are
that,
you on page
page
15? Okay.
like conduct disruptive to the work of other employees. How are you going to ever determine that?
Yeah.
And how would you even begin to investigate it? Or abusive lunch periods? What does that mean?
So we're gonna move over to this guy then? You wanna move over to the,
Well, I think that,
I see what you're saying, they're incorporated in both, so let's,
Right.
yeah, that doesn't apply to us.
Use of obscene language.
or I can understand, you know,
I've heard
threatening
that
other
from you
persons,
before.
I know.
threatening or instigating a fight. That's
Don't ever
that's
say
a pretty high level misconduct.
But it's the F word, I just want you to know.
You're equating it with
Hey,
disrupting.
mics are on, pay attention.
You're equating it with conduct disruptive of the work environment or other employees. Those two things get equated, and I think there's some problems with the way that this is written if you're going to really truly enforce it. And this leads into your complaint policy too, because that code of conduct is used as the basis for whether a complaint is considered.
I don't know how these would be separated, but you're right, this section pertains to workplace standards
Yes, it does.
as opposed to ethical standards.
Yes, it does.
And maybe that's the way we divide it. Maybe we actually come up with a new chapter on ethical standards rather than workplace standards. And then the ethical standards can be included with, can be placed on us, on elected officials, well, on the county board.
So create a code of ethics policy that would apply to board members as well as staff of the non-union.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a separate policy, not including it in this policy.
Well, it's certainly not, well, you could make it a separate policy, I guess, but it's certainly not with this workplace behavior.
Some of them can go hand in hand, though. Ethical behavior and workplace etiquette, they're kind of the same. You know, yes, it can go outside of the workplace, just like the things that you do outside of the workplace can impact your employment, but it has to be considered, right? So,
Yeah.
it's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer it.
Yeah, that was tricky. Out of,
Would it make it too complicated to just have a completely separate policy for like ethics? And just tie bar it somehow, or instead of just adding another chapter? I mean, because my goal, the less confusion, the better. So would it be better just to have a whole different policy and maybe refer to the complaint or non-union one? If there is anything, kind of refer to that in some instances, but just have a different policy altogether? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Just say that it applies to non-union, and then in the policy, in the non-union policy, be like reference ethics policy number, whatever it is.
Right.
So, as an option, and it might be the simpler option, but we may still want to look at those,
Right.
the conduct that are already in there.
And I would say don't, especially with the version before us, take a look at that city of Traverse City, because there's some things that aren't necessarily enforceable, but I think they exhibit our goals in our office. For instance, civility is the baseline of respect owed in public life. Things like that really set the tone. The city recognizes the importance of transparency and fairness to building trust between government and the public. I like those.
Yeah, and I can tell you, when I draft policies, I tend to do a couple of things. I used to do them a little bit differently than are shown here. Those kind of statements that you're talking about become what I refer to as the purpose statements of the policy. These are the things we're trying to encourage, okay? So that becomes the purpose of the policy, and then the policy is stated as plainly as possible. And then there's oftentimes a procedure as to how that policy gets implemented. like the policy could be just simply that the, all employees and commissioners, employees, elected officials, everyone will strive to this particular code of conduct, ethical behavior and all
Yes.
considerations. And the policy is, here's some things that could be considered violations.
Receiving gifts of $500,
Right.
whatever your number is, right? So those.
You guys got a number yet?
I think it's gotta be $500, man. I want that
Yeah.
Palm Pilot.
That thing's more expensive now. I'm just
Probably
saying.
not,
Yeah.
because Palm's out of business, but.
Oh.
That was the starter for phones.
It was for smartphones.
Should
Really the
potential-
It was the precursor.
Vendors be buying us free meals?
Well, I'll tell you this, that every year Motorola that sold Calhoun County radios, they took a bunch of people down to Chicago and put them up in a hotel and
Sold
wined them
radios.
and dined them and took them to a hockey game.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Dang, we're in this little tiny county, nobody even thinks of taking us anywhere.
Well, wait until next year when we start to buy $1 million worth of radios. Somebody's gonna wanna take you to a
I
hockey
think,
game.
I think we've already gotten that request.
Yeah.
What I heard.
Oh, have we?
So having it in writing is probably a good idea.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But again, the way that's
Pick
often,
a number, what your number is,
disguised,
Grand
if you
Traverse
will.
was
It's
200,
not-
was it? For a
that's not the
meal,
only
okay.
purpose they're taking.
And that's way too high for a meal.
Is it? I don't know.
Per person? Yeah.
Okay, then
To
there
me.
you go.
I mean.
What was the number?
200 was
There
the
you go.
number for food and drink, I think they said, right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what kind of drinks they're getting, but.
Wow.
Champagne.
Yeah.
Champagne cocktails.
It's like the,
Uh,
Wow.
First you gotta determine black and white. Is it gonna be okay to accept a free meal from a vendor? Can they buy you dinner?
So you want us to take a crack at a code of conduct policy, a separate code of conduct policy that uses the aspirational statements in the Traverse City Code of Ordinances as a guide.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
It's the flowers around the edge.
Then I think one of
So
the-
I'm gonna say, just to throw it out there, part of me, and I think the city of Traverse City does not allow vendors to buy meals. Makes everybody go Dutch. I can live with that, or I could live with a limit of, $60? Yeah, $75?
In Leelanau County, you're gonna have to be $75.
Yeah,
minimum.
I'm not thinking dinner though. I'm thinking more of a lunch thing.
Yeah, most of the time it's something like.
Yeah, I'm not thinking they're gonna take you out to Blue and. You're mad because you never got a free meal. That's it.
It never occurred to me.
Beyond what we've talked about so far, the one thing that I know you were interested in, Alan, was to define the complaint procedure more precisely than what it is.
Well,
In particular, because I think the complaint procedure we have in place right now is adequate for anything other than complaints directly against the administrator. Because it requires the administrator to do the investigation. And I've done a couple of those already since being here. And, it's the ones that, if it's directly against me, then obviously I can't do the investigation. So how do you deal with that? And I don't think it's defined very well if it is.
oh, no, as I had written, the third parties are the ones that are tapped in the city of Traverse City and Grand Traverse County. They have an ethics panel that the board appoints in Grand Traverse County if things get to a certain level. And the city of Traverse City appoints someone as a mediator or a complaint, as a person to investigate and make determinations. And I don't know how you feel about it as our HR director, but I don't know if you have a preference. I just know that it's a pretty tight place here. And if I worked here, I was in your position, who that these are not only my friends, but people that I will associate with and make decisions with, I would feel more comfortable with a third party helping me out as far as if a complaint rose to a certain level.
It's just defining what that is.
Yeah, it is tough.
Because I can tell you, friend or not, I have no qualms at all doing an investigation on whoever and wherever it leads. Personally, that's never bothered me at all. I did a ton of them in both as an employee of Calhoun and as an independent attorney representing them and other counties. I've done more than I can say, but the one that is problematic is when you designate the administrator as the person that does the investigation. What if when the claim is made against the administrator, what do? And that obviously has to be different. And I think you can't have the investigation done by anybody that is in my direct line of supervision. It could be an elected official, it could be a commissioner, it could be a group of commissioners. It could be a complete third party. In most places that I'm familiar with, they get referred to the outside counsel that is currently retained by the county. In a lot of instances, though, it is a separate legal counsel as well. But then you're really talking about getting into a serious expense.
Yeah.
And what may be an appropriate thing to do would be to say that you appoint a group of commissioners to be the ones to determine, to either do the investigation or essentially farm it out under their supervision. That might be how I would recommend doing something like that, where the complaint is against the administrator. And it would be something like, you could do it any number of ways. You could say the board chair and the vice chair will select a third commissioner to be the ethics or the investigative committee. And then the three of them would decide how it got investigated. Again, you could hire the sheriff to do the investigation, not hire, but appoint the sheriff or the undersheriff to do the investigation. If that was suitable, you could appoint the Cole-Stoker-Toski to do the investigation if you deem that appropriate. You could appoint a third legal counsel if you thought the situation was sufficient that it needed that.
Or
What about
a
Matt
mediator.
Norford? What about Norford?
I no
Because
problem.
we're employing him anyway.
I
He's
don't
done a
like
lot.
that.
You
He's
don't.
done a
You
lot
don't.
I do not like
Yes.
that.
Why?
I think they are also very close, especially if it's the administrator. They work hand in hand all the time. And I think you need separation if everyone is going to have buy-in with the conclusion.
Jim?
Can I comment on something? So if
Absolutely.
we take it to Cole-Stoker, it would not be the lawyer who was most involved in our.
Right.
No,
Right?
they
So
have
they
a
would
big
assign
firm.
another person on their staff because they do not have direct, relationships already.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we use our current legal counsel, it would
And I-
not be Matt Nordford that's doing it. He's a union guy, we go to him for most things, but he would not be involved in any investigation.
Right.
And he wasn't in our case
Well,
earlier
He
either.
was
That's
not, no.
not what happened the last time.
He
Well,
was not involved in
Oh, no, that's
No,
right.
he
It
was
was,
not.
It was Sarah Osborne.
right.
Yeah.
But what about mediators?
Well, mediators, I mean, mediators don't do investigations, Alan. What they do is they listen to both sides of an issue, and they try to bring the sides together. They don't make decisions. True mediators don't make decisions. They say, you know, if one side says white and the other side says black, they try to get them to say gray, get them to agree to what gray is. That's what mediators do.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
probably using the wrong word. I'm looking for someone who's a professional and does what you do in HR.
A professional like person who leads investigations for complaints, is that what you're asking?
Um, Someone in the business of HR, I guess. There
But
must
that's
be
gonna
these folks
somebody
out
we
there.
pay.
that's actually not a bad idea. You could, for example, if they were willing, that group that we're saying would decide,
Commissioners.
the group of commissioners could say, we'll go to Grand Traverse County. Will your HR director conduct an investigation for us? They might be willing to do that. But most HR people are not, there's not like a cadre of unaffiliated human resource professionals that can do independent investigations.
Mhm.
That's why most focus on law firms, because that's law firms' bread and butter. And I
That's
know
what
you
they
don't
do.
like the idea of Cole Stover doing that, but I can assure you, I've done investigations, you know, of personal friends that ended up with a recommendation that they be terminated. And it was the right thing. It was clear that they had violated a rule, and I had to recommend, yes, they need to get fired. Honestly, I was on a committee that, when I worked at the advertising agency, that recommended that my wife be fired, not for misconduct, but to be laid off.
Oh, they had to
Financial
choose someone.
reasons. I was on the committee, and I said, yep, she should be laid off.
And you started eating better at home, probably.
No, but all I'm saying is that truly is, and I understand that it seems foreign to somebody that's not an attorney,
Mhm.
but that's how we are trained and built to function, is that kind of impartiality, regardless of what your fidelity is to the investigation
Mhm.
and the client, not to the person that you might be investigating. It's just not.
So,
And I know you don't necessarily accept that, but I'm telling you, that's really the truth.
and if we're already paying Cole Stoker, and they will put somebody on this, other than the people we deal with all the time, it
But I will also tell you,
makes sense.
when I've been in that position, I've also said, look, here's good reasons why I shouldn't do that investigation. You might want to consider outside counsel. And that's why I say you could set up this subcommittee of the Board of Commissioners that can make that decision. Like I said, the sheriff, possibly a human resources professional from another county that would be willing to do it. Cole Stoker, possibly another party. There are mediators that will act as essentially arbitrators or investigators.
That's the word I needed, as arbitrator rather than mediator.
Because an arbitrator can make a decision.
I just like to get it out of this building. And whether it's filed against you or the treasurer or the clerk, or I just think that there's more buy-in to the conclusion, and I've been in this building long enough to know that you're better off having a third party than to have someone, and this isn't, I'm not saying that they have preconceived notions, but it's there again, the appearance of preconceived notions
Yeah.
enter into it. It doesn't mean it has to be reality. Reality feeds on itself if people keep talking, or reality loses
I
when people
agree, I agree.
keep talking about things that aren't
I
real.
agree, Alan. That's why I say, it's the same thing with the conflict of interest policy. You're setting up a process, and the process is that the three commissioners make the decision, and that's final. And you guys, and you can even indicate why you've determined that that's the appropriate selection, that Cole Stoker is the appropriate selection for these reasons. And
Or whoever we choose,
yeah,
whether an arbitrator or
Whoever it
whoever,
would be.
a third party it needs to go to a third party.
whoever it
It
would be,
rises
and you
to
make that
level.
determination.
Yeah, I like that.
And
That
the,
part too.
and the real problem is going to be obviously cost. And you guys are in the position, I think, as three commissioners in the position to make that determination, that this is something that is serious enough that it merits a third-party investigation at county's expense.
Okay, so we could have the option of just referring something to Cole Stoker. If it rose to a certain level, we could,
And again.
so there would be options.
Right. That committee would be empowered to make that decision.
I was looking for the Grand Traverse. It seems like they create a media and ethics panel which shall document its findings. And who does it say our members here? It seems like commissioners can be, but not necessarily. Anyways, they create an ethics panel prior to the event. They name it probably at your organizational meeting every year, and that's your panel. So if something, it rises to the level that can't be handled at a lower level, that's your appeal panel, basically.
I guess I need to say, just an explanation, part of the reason that I steer away from people who work here, including us, is the last 4 years or so have been pretty creepy in terms of there's been so much turmoil with employees and with staff and so many in terms of politics that it would have been really hard to trust that there was true level
Well, that's where, again, I think
fairness
the
going on.
determination of how something like that gets investigated, as long as you've rested that in the hands of a group of people, everybody's going to have to trust that. Everybody's going to have to trust that. I realize that
I think we need
that it is
ugly.
as prone to the possibility of a witch hunt as anything is, and there's no way you're going to be able to prevent that completely.
I hope the ugliness is over. But
Well, whether it is or not, I guess what I'm saying is I think you need to design a process that is fair, that you determine is fair, regardless of how you think it might be used. You have to determine a fair process and recognize that in the wrong hands, it has the potential for being abused, and that's,
yeah, I don't want it to become a weapon.
Just the way it is.
well,
But all you can do, as far as us here, is we create the structure. And you gotta have a proper structure before
yeah.
you can get to an
Then-
answer
then-
that people
then
will.
instead,
believe.
maybe instead of it being the chair, the vice chair, and one of their selections, maybe it could be I hate to make it partisan, but one party selects one, the other party selects one, and then those two people select who the third's going to be. And if you're concerned about politics, that might be the easiest way to handle it.
That's why I like Cole Stoker, is it just
But it
gets
beca-
all the
it-
I agree with
politics
you.
It
out.
can become
understand.
that way.
I
That's the
understand.
problem.
It takes the question out of the room, I understand. But
Cole
what I've
Stoker,
seen,
there's no politics.
Well, the perception of some, in particular, and remember I made the comment about the conflict of interest, that once you have a process and there's a vote of the board, they don't matter. You have to agree that, I mean, they're going to matter, they're gonna say whatever they're
Yeah,
gonna
but there's
say,
been politics
but
up here
there's
too.
still, you still have created a final procedure that's gonna apply in these instances, and everybody agrees they're gonna stick to it. You can do the same thing with the complaint policy and say, however you decide to pick them, you agree that that's going to be, you're going to defer that decision. All 7 of you are going to defer that decision to this group, and you'll stick with that.
And Travis has it written out in 5B1 as to how they,
What do they do?
They have an ethics panel.
yeah, it's an ethics panel, and they pretty much state if it's the county administrator or human resources, then it goes to the code of ethics panel. And then that code of ethics panel is made of either the chairperson or the vice chair, unless it's one of them, then I believe it's the board picks the chair of the ethics panel, and that the chair has to pick 2 totally independent individuals that are not affiliated with anything.
That
Not
are on the
affiliated
board?
at all with the board,
It-
so.
It just, yeah, it just says it can be. It doesn't say who, it just says the identity of the person or persons complained of. Go
So
ahead.
when I've understood ethics panels in the past, other than it's usually in bigger areas, bigger corporations or
Jurisdictions.
counties, right? So our population is small, but typically the people that are appointed on this ethics panel, if they're like a pool of people, right? So there's, let's say, 5
I see.
employees, and then they have the couple of chair people or whoever it is that are in charge, and then they pick another person or 2 people from that panel, and then they make the decision, and it's final, whatever that decision is. But those people in that pool, they need to be trusted. They need to be, people look up to the employees, everybody has to have respect for their decision. They can't just be really affiliated in one way or another, and I think that in our small community, that might be hard to form that trust, right? Because right now I feel like there's not a lot of trust going a lot of ways. But if you have examples of people that you think many employees look up to and say, every single time that person has fair judgment, then that judgment, as well as the other people on the ethics panel, would be respected, right? So that's the trick with the ethics panel, is finding those perfect individuals that everyone trusts.
And you could come up with 10 people who agree to serve on it, and then draw 3 names out of a hat and add some randomness to it. I did not mean to poo-poo your thought on the Republican or Democrat. I think you kind of got to deal with it. It just, I honestly haven't seen it. I just haven't seen that as a driving force since we've been here. Oh, maybe in the past. I'm saying right now I don't see it as a driving force.
I think you have to have one of these.
But yeah, it makes sense.
So
Just avoid the question.
So just to throw another thing out there, what if it's something that it gets referred to our legal counsel, and if legal counsel is too tightly involved, they have to go to an outside firm to get an opinion from them? Because I think that happened, that has, I mean, I know they take their standard pretty highly, that if they
Yeah.
feel like they're too tight, they go outside.
About the
outside of
only
that.
time I've ever recommended as legal counsel that I shouldn't be involved is when I was actually involved in the process. Like if I was involved in the decision that's being challenged or the action that was taken. You know, for example, if I did a preliminary investigation, that would disqualify me. It was times like that I would get an outside legal counsel to act as the investigating entity. But I think you
Really like the ethics panel.
My only concern is for such a small community. I mean, that's,
Surely we must have an honest person here.
well, I know we do, but does everybody perceive them that way? That's the thing. That's the key, like, can you,
Yes.
it's gonna be tough.
Yes. But maybe if you can get 10 people who will say they put their name in and then draw out 3 names
But what if you get
adds that
five,
randomness to
what
it.
if you get 5 people that say absolutely not?
Well, they agree to be on the panel.
But the other thing I think you should think about, and if, in particular, if you're talking about limiting those ethic panels, and as Grand Traverse does, to the administrator or human resources, I think it needs to be somebody that's responsible for the employment of those people. I would not be comfortable at all in having that I would be investigated by somebody that I wasn't responsible for.
Well, yeah, no, third parties is, I think what they said in that, I think. It was
I don't know, but
Someone unrelated or
if it permits that, I would be very uncomfortable
I will
with that.
blame you.
I'd want it to be 3 commissioners.
No.
And I don't care how they get picked necessarily.
Oh, you're talking about the commissioner phase, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Because I think that has to be your ethics.
so one
panel.
on each side and, yeah, I'm not,
That has
but-
to be your ethics panel is 3 commissioners.
right.
And you can even structure it in a way that you actually render the ultimate decision based upon, say you hire an investigator and that report comes to you, but you still review it and render the ultimate decision that may or may not agree with the investigation. Or your investigation may be limited. We want you to find these facts. We want you to determine these facts. We're not asking you to determine the ultimate decision on whether a policy has been violated. But we want you to determine these facts that relate to that policy, and then you make the ultimate decision on whether the policy has been violated. You could structure it that way. Because I think that was kind of in the complaint against me, that was kind of the concern that the ultimate decision was made by the investigators and not by the commissioners that received the investigation. I don't know, maybe that's kind of how I perceived your concern.
I haven't even, honestly, since we had these, I haven't even thought about that. That hasn't been in my mind, so when I'm talking about general populace. So when I said treasurer, clerk, whoever, that's more of who I'm thinking of. Honestly, if it's a complaint against the administrator, you probably, as I think through it, needs an independent to investigate it, and then it probably should come back to us.
To ultimately make a decision.
And make a decision, right.
I think that would be fine. But like I said, as long as it was a committee of those that are empowered to hire, fire, and discipline the administrator.
Yeah.
I don't think it can be anybody else.
I agree fully.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be this board's job to investigate electeds, though.
You gotta find, well,
Because that would be the prosecutor, and if he wouldn't be okay with it, he'd send it off, because that's
It's
typically
not
how
even
that
the
happens,
prosecutor.
right?
It's the only person that can remove an elected official is the governor of the state of Michigan.
Right.
well,
So-
recall.
But I'm like,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
without a recall action, the governor can remove officials.
Right, but we can censor.
You can censure. You can do that.
Censure, is that sort of like freckles?
Fracas.
Yeah, sort of.
Yes, you can censure, and again, but it's rarely done. It's
Yeah.
very rarely done.
I know that word.
Where are we
Now that I think
leaving
about
this?
it, I did do one censure we had a guy that was not living in the district. He moved out of the village where he had been elected as a trustee, and he refused to acknowledge that fact, and they censured him, and he ultimately resigned. But yeah, now that I think about it, I did draft a censure resolution that was passed by the board. But it was not Calhoun County.
all right, so circling back to the conduct, do you have enough
Yeah.
from us to
Need a dollar
draft
figure?
something?
I think I've got one.
You put a question mark and a dollar in front of it.
Um,
Actually, you could, I suppose, I think we're all in agreement, there should be a dollar limit. We just don't know how much dinners cost.
Let them do the research and see what's the average, maybe. Like,
I'd be
that's
fine with it.
applicable.
Are you expensing those $2 bills?
They just don't last long, that's the problem.
All right, and then the complaint policy, what's the agreement on that? Are we okay with having them draft something up to kind of bring forward, is like, hey, here are some options, like,
What I heard is, in particular, we last talked about if a complaint is against the administrator, that there would be an independent investigation, then they come back to the county board to make a determination. Is that what you guys?
Mm-hmm.
that was
Good with
something,
that?
right?
And I don't
But
think,
who the independent investigation would be, do you need answers on that?
Well,
I guess.
no, I think what I am suggesting is that decision would be made by that panel as to who it would be. It could be.
Oh,
you have first you start off with a 3-person panel,
Right.
and they would determine if it goes anywhere.
Right.
And if
Correct.
they determine it's not going, and it's a bipartisan.
Yeah, they could, yes, they could, in the first instance, make
Right.
it say, this doesn't even violate
This is
any
bullshit.
policy,
Yeah.
it's rejected.
Right.
But if they think it needs an investigation, they could conceivably investigate it themselves if they saw fit. Or they could refer it to an outside counsel to post over, or to another outside counsel, or to an arbitrator or some other person to act as an impartial investigator. We wouldn't have to define who that would be.
Do we want to narrow it more to say you don't investigate and you hire an outside and leave it up to them who they hire on the outside? Or do you want to leave that option open to them, that they can decide themselves whether to investigate or
Right.
hire an outside panel?
I'm not sure I want to leave it to a panel for that they could do the investigation. They should determine who.
I
Okay.
agree.
I would be more comfortable with that instead of leaving it to a body, like let them go out and find who does the investigation, and then it can come back to them as to, that'd be my
Well, then
recommendation.
it comes back to the full board.
Right,
Well,
right.
I think it comes back to the panel
Would
for,
that be recommended by your HR manager? Is that what you're thinking? That panel would work with the HR to get the investigator? Because they're not gonna work with the.
No, they'd have to do it themselves. It cannot be
Because
somebody.
what if it is HR? So,
No, my point is, it can't be somebody if it's a investigation about the administrator, you cannot have that be somebody in the chain of command of the
Right.
administrator. It doesn't, that taints the investigation right from the beginning.
so I think it comes back to the panel itself. They make a decision.
Yep.
And then and that can be announced to the board, but I sure don't want it
Litigated here.
litigated
Right.
at a meeting.
Yeah, agreed.
well, in that
And you're gonna get
instance,
public comment.
well, but in that instance, it would be a closed session, I would imagine.
And that's
Yeah.
why,
Yes, thank you.
yeah, it'd have to be a
It
closed.
would have to be a closed session if it's in that instance.
Yeah, we
so.
don't want it to turn
Okay,
into a
I just want
circus.
to make sure I have this right. So you're gonna move forward with an ethics panel? Is that correct?
Well,
A panel, what
all
it's
right,
called
we
would
were,
be
it's a
determined.
committee, isn't it? If it's from
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
could be a committee or a panel, whatever.
So there's gonna be 3 commissioners, so like, let's say at the organizational, there'll be 3 commissioners appointed to the ethics.
Ethics,
Committee, panel, whatever.
whatever, yeah.
And then that committee will have rules or guidelines on steps in your ethics policy to move forward on certain issues.
They will determine if the complaint rises to a level that requires an investigation. And they would be empowered to choose the investigator who would,
So they're not investigating themselves. I just want to be clear.
I think
No.
we determined
Okay.
that.
No,
That's
and
what I
then-
heard just a few minutes ago, so that's why I was.
No.
Yeah, no, it's
no.
pretty- yeah. And then the investigation would come back to the full county board.
In a closed session.
Investigating result.
Well,
Right.
I think it's up to Jim whether it be closed or not.
I think it should be. We don't need headlines.
I'm just saying, it's not our choice. It's Jim's choice.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess you could leave it, yeah, to whoever, the investigator, whoever's being investigated have the choice of whether they want it in closed session or public. Like,
that's
you
what the
could-
law says.
Yeah,
So,
we have
yeah.
no choice.
So, yeah.
That's what the law says.
Okay.
So this would be in the ethics policy, not in the complaint procedure.
No, it'd be a part of the complaint procedure,
Yeah.
but that would be, it would be the complaint yeah, it's still part of the complaint procedure, but it's exclusive to complaints against the administrator and or possibly, I don't know that it has to be, HR has to be included in that, even though I think Grand
Yeah.
Traverse policy includes that.
It does include that, but they might have a department do they have a department all by themselves?
They do.
Sure.
Okay.
So maybe that's why.
Well, the
I don't
idea
know.
is the reason for that is sometimes a complaint can be against HR, but I think if that's the case, it goes to the administrator, and I'm fully capable of investigating that. You don't want the investigator to be somebody below in the chain of command,
Oh,
but it can be
right.
somebody
Right.
above.
Right.
It can be the supervisor, because that's the supervisor's responsibility to do anyways. I think the only real unique situation where you have to have this ethics panel is when it's an investigation of the administrator. I think that's the only time it really applies, to us at least.
Well, what if it's an elected official?
You can investigate all you want, and I'll tell you, I investigated elected officials
Sure.
here as county administrator. I conducted an investigation regarding an elected official. Found that there was nothing to the complaint. Sent a letter to the elected official that there was nothing to the complaint. And that
But
was that.
what if it's a board member?
That's a little dicier, because then I'm investigating, and like I just said, you shouldn't have an investigation
Right.
below. But if that's it could be another complaint against another commissioner. Could be handled by this process, though,
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Well, they aren't on the panel.
as long as they're not on the panel.
Alan, I think on that with an elected official, I do think that what Mr. Dyer is saying, like when he investigated the elected official, I do think though that within your complaint policy, you should be able to state who's making that complaint against that elected official. And that's not confidential to the person that the complaint's against.
I disagree 100%. I
He disagrees.
absolutely disagree with that.
So let's say, for instance, someone makes a complaint against the clerk, and he investigates it, but he in his mind will not tell the clerk who filed the complaint. And that goes back to
Until it's
Commissioner
resolved.
Allgaier's witch hunt.
Until the complaint is resolved.
But then again, there isn't someone that's named.
No, I absolutely 100% disagree, and I articulated the reasons for that many, many times.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if the target of the investigation knows that who made the complaint, anything they do positive action is considered, I'm trying to influence you with a bribe. Negative action is retaliation. You are only asking for trouble if you do that.
I agree.
And frankly, that was the defect in the investigation against me. That was the ultimate defect.
Well,
It became public.
well, but I would even, if it's a board member, like what's the point in any, yeah.
Where is we do have a whistleblower policy.
No, there's a statute that covers that.
I think we have a policy.
You may have a policy, but it's going to be overridden by the Michigan Whistleblowers Protection Act.
Ooh, okay, well, anyway, so we have a whistleblowers policy and we have state law, which I think precludes if it's filed on. But do you have to, like for state law to have protection from whistleblower, do you have to state that in your complaint?
No.
Only the circumstances have to be, if you complain about somebody, the first whistleblowers trial that I ever did was based upon a sheriff's deputy making the statement, or the sheriff making a statement to a sheriff's deputy. What are you allegedly making a statement to a sheriff's deputy? What are you doing talking about me up in Wayland? And Wayland was the site of the state police, and the deputy intimated that meant that he knew, the sheriff knew, he was going up to the state police to make complaints about it. It was based upon that flimsy a statement. But, all I have to do is say, I have complained about you to another law enforcement agency or some enforcement
Employee
agency.
or whatever.
And that's enough. That's enough.
For the Whistleblower
Yes.
Act to protect
That person, yes. And like I said, your policy can say whatever it wants to say, but the state statute is going to preempt any policy that you have.
In our process, when it was completed, I would have felt more comfortable, and I do believe that rather than having the individuals involved just receive a, if you will, redacted version of what the investigation was, I mean, I think they should have received the full investigation. I mean, you may disagree with that too.
Yeah, because here's the problem. When all of that is disclosed, then retaliation does occur. That's the problem, and you can't control it. And more importantly, you deter people coming forward. And that's one of the things in a whistleblower is they're entitled to anonymity up to a certain
Mhm.
point. Because once everybody knows they're the whistleblower, forget it.
Yeah, well, I think not feeling that you were, that you were not just involved in the process, but you understood how the final conclusions were reached.
Mm-hmm.
I think that prevents people from coming forward too, because that leaves, I mean, I would want to know what the final determination is, and I would think I would have a right to know what this investigation about me determined. So I see it from the employee's view as much as the view of retaliation, that at some point we are a government.
You're going to
and
really
it's
want a
public
legal
money.
opinion on that, because I think you're opening a huge can of worms when you disclose as fully as that is. Typically, for example, when I would investigate a sexual harassment complaint,
Mhm.
the process is I tell the employee, this will be held. You will not be, your identity will not be intentionally disclosed to the person. In all likelihood, they'll figure it out because of the circumstances during the
Mhm.
investigation. They'll figure out it's you, but we will not intentionally disclose that. But in the end, I may not be able to tell you exactly what our determination was, but I can tell you what action was taken, and that's all.
And I can see that with a sexual harassment
Yeah,
complaint. I
but
think we
it's-
have a separate sexual harassment
You do.
policy.
And it's the same situation though, because the potential for retaliation, the potential for abuse of that is the same regardless of the nature of the complaint. Regardless of the nature of the complaint, the potential for abuse is the same. And I have a wealth of experience in dealing with the consequences of inappropriate disclosure of investigative material.
I'm more of an open kind of guy.
No, I understand.
So we're going to disagree on that one.
But openness, for the
Well,
same, Alan, for the same reason that employees are entitled to have a complaint against them held in closed session, it's
Mhm.
the same policy reason that the investigation shouldn't be disclosed. What's the point of a closed session?
Mhm.
If you're going to then take the investigative report and release it to the public. So if you want to do what you're talking about, you could do that in closed session, disclose the content of that. But again, they're going to know all the people that came in and testified against them.
So would it be a more we're going down rabbit holes, but anyway.
Not really, this is an important issue.
To have rather than release it to the public, but to have that person involved in a closed session and because it.
And you can disclose to them that which I would highly recommend, that which your legal counsel suggests you can and should be disclosed to them, but nothing more. Because that again, you are opening a huge can of worms when you start, particularly if the decision is unfounded. The decision is the complaint is unfounded.
Well, maybe you do deserve a lawsuit if the investigation is unfounded.
You might deserve a lawsuit, and that will come out in discovery in a lawsuit, yes. But that's also subject to protective orders and other controls that a judge will supervise in litigation. But yeah, so that certainly that's a whole different thing.
Don't think I don't respect your opinion, I do. I just kind of look at it from a different lens.
I understand, Alan, but again, you're opening a huge can of worms if you do that.
Yeah, well, I think in that instant, to Jim's point, is when there's an investigation that takes place, people get interviewed, and that is not kept confidential, you're going to end up losing the confidence of that. And that's what I don't want to lose. So,
Yes.
and that's what I think is extremely important for that process to stay confidential, to protect.
I would accept the report that was redacted with names, but I don't necessarily trust an interpretation of a report. I don't trust an interpretation of a report near as much as the original report with redactions.
And I would argue that those reports that did come were redacted. Like I would argue that. So
This
right.
shouldn't be going back to Jim, because I'm really not.
Right.
That isn't what I'm talking about.
No, I know.
I'm talking about the future.
I understand, but the only thing you talk about is sometimes with experience. So.
But then here's the thing with redactions, is I can almost guarantee you that if I looked, if only the names were redacted from a report, I could, by just reading the report, tell you that's this person, that's that person, that's this person. You would, it's almost universally you can figure it out. And it's very easy.
Yes.
Because to the specificity that you have to have in a report, you can figure it out very easily.
And the things you don't know for sure, you're gonna surmise.
And that's worse.
It is,
That's
but
worse.
you just created a case for surmising.
I know, but at least it's surmise based upon no information, because that's always going to happen. Everybody's going to say, well, that had to be so and so. I know who made that complaint against me. You know.
All right.
I'm crawling out of the rabbit hole.
We can beat that horse till he runs away. So.
Do we get anything done?
We got a lot done.
I guess that question should be asked to Jim and Jen. Do you feel like you have enough to work off of?
I do.
So.
Yeah, that's a good start at it.
Got a good start. I guess when you got something, then they'll reach out to us and talk with the clerk and make sure we can get another meeting in and review it, I guess. So. Discussion items?
I've got an allergy this week. That's just crazy.
Okay. Any other discussion items?
Yes, have a good holiday.
Yeah.
Public
Merry
comment?
Christmas.
None? Board member comments? None? All right. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
That we're adjourned.
Cool.